in between. I'm Manuela Leuenberger, Product Support Coordinator at DDLS, and I will be your host for today's webinar. Before we get started, please keep in mind that there will be a question and answer session at the end of the presentation, but I encourage you to enter your questions in the comments panel throughout the presentation. Also, there will be a short survey before you leave. Our presenter today is Gary Duffield, Marketing and Strategic Alliances Director here at DDLS. Gary heads up the DDLS Alliances team, looking after partners such as Microsoft, Cisco, and Axelox. He is the architect of DDLS's 2016 Microsoft Worldwide Learning Partner Award and a veteran of Microsoft products since MS-DOS 2.11. Gary is well placed to share his view on life, the universe, and Azure. So without further ado, I will hand the presentation over to Gary.
Manuela, thank you for that introduction. If you pass the ball in my direction, which you've duly done, I will share my screen, number one, and if you could confirm that you can see the screen, albeit with a random grey box shoved in the middle of it somewhere, then I'll commence.
See the screen? Correct, we can see the screen. Thanks, Gary.
Excellent, thank you. Well, I guess good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to DDLS, and thank you for joining my session today. I think we've got about 26 or 27 people on the call so far, and that number will grow up. So will go up. It's my mission to keep that number for the duration of this session over the next sort of 60 minutes. But don't panic. There is a warning here. This presentation is going to use words like digital, disruption, and leverage, and it's also got graphs and rhetorical questions. I don't know about you, but I've been to an awful lot of sessions, read an awful lot of material. And, you know, the phrases digital disruption, etc., are becoming a little hackneyed, a little bit overused. Unfortunately, they do feature throughout this presentation. However, don't worry, because I won't be mentioning Uber as the biggest taxi company in the world, who's really disrupted the taxi marketplace, despite the fact they have no cars, except I guess I did just mention it. I won't be mentioning Airbnb as the biggest hotelier in the world, who haven't actually got any hotels, and I certainly won't mention my experience in Edinburgh with them recently, which is a bit of a disaster. And I'm not going to use the Kodak example, you know, an organisation that had the patent for digital photography, but basically put it in a drawer and locked it away because they didn't want to disrupt their film business. And I guess we all know that their business failed to develop, excuse the pun, and they disappeared, restructured, and fundamentally went bankrupt. So we are talking about digital disruption. We are talking about Microsoft. We're talking about how that organisation has moved from, you know, a version of DOS in the 90s, a version of BASIC rather in the 70s, through to an organisation that's in the Gartner leader quadrant of the cloud-based technologies. So if I'm not mentioning Uber, I'm going to start with a story about a circus, and that might be a little bit bizarre, but hopefully you'll appreciate the analogy. I report to our CEO. He's a decent chap, a guy called Mel Shaw, and periodically he sends books around to the senior leadership team, and there was a couple last year that really resonated with me. I highly recommend people get hold of the Phoenix Project, which was a really good read. In fact, I read it twice because there were some big words I didn't understand the first time. And the other book that I really enjoyed was Blue Ocean Strategy. And that talks about how organizations are disrupting themselves. And I really like the Circus Olay example. And I think it really fits with the story of Microsoft that we're about to tell. If you think of, you know, a circus, the circus, it's been around for literally hundreds of years. But it was pretty well understood. It was pretty hackneyed. People kind of were a bit bored of it. It was a bit tedious. They'd roll up into town. We knew what we were going to get. There'd be clowns. There'd be elephants. There'd be people on horseback. There'd be people flying through the air on trapezes. And circuses were closing. You know, audiences just were not interested. The market had contracted and contracted and contracted. And then along comes a new organisation, Circus Olay, and they decide to enter that market. They enter a market which is, you know, sort of dying on its feet. And they've had a tremendous success, and it's a great success story. You know, what did they do to do that? Well, they reinvented the circus-type business. They did some radical things. They took the fun out of it to start with. There are no clowns in a Circus Olay story, for example. They restructured it. They added some kind of recurring revenue element, by which I mean, you know, rather than just doing the same thing every single year when the circus ships up, they added new themes. They added new ways to entertain the audience. and they pretty much, exist all over the world. They're in Las Vegas all the time. They've been here in Perth, where I'm based, many times. They've completely reinvented that. Now, I'm not for 1 minute suggesting that Microsoft are a circus who've been around for far too long. Arguably, they've had a few white elephants along the way, with sort of Nokia and etc. But they did reach a point in their history where they were ticking over. They failed to be exciting anymore. And if we've looked at the press over the last little while, we've seen lots of stories, lots of people reporting that Microsoft is no longer cool. I love the example that I found, I think, yesterday. I stopped giving a damn about Microsoft when Clippy died. For those of you who are not that old, Clippy was a little paperclip that used to pop up in the bottom corner of any document. Say, hey, you appear to be writing a CV, a document, a will, whatever it happens to be. Can I help with that? It disappeared, I think, probably with Office 2000 or something, or certainly Windows 2000. No more on why Microsoft is not so cool. So many times on Microsoft, why Microsoft is not cool. They really, running the risk of becoming boring and not relevant. Well, that kind of changed. Suddenly Microsoft is reinventing itself. It's taking on a whole new persona, and suddenly Microsoft is cool again. And actually, I hope in this deck to actually prove to you that is the case, as we talk about the story that Microsoft have been on to get where they are today. And there's been ups and there's been downs. I'll talk a little bit about the structure, how Microsoft exists from a management team, just to put faces to the names, perhaps, talk about where we have good relationships and where we don't, and who the players are in Australia. And my aim is to start with pretty much basic on the ITAR a million years ago and end up with Azure. I've got 60 minutes to do that. We'll see how we get on. So if Microsoft is cool, does that make me cool again? Well, sadly not. I'm still an overweight, middle-aged guy with a huge mortgage, one child, for whom I've become just a filler of her car with petrol and pretty much nothing else. I do, however, have the great honour of sitting on the senior leadership team here at DDLS. I look after our alliances, and one of our biggest is Microsoft. We do a phenomenal amount of Microsoft business, and I've just run some stats, actually, and here's an interesting thing for you. Our most popular course last year in the Microsoft stack, this may surprise you, was it Azure, was it Office 365, was it MS-DOS 211? No, it was PowerShell. And that's a huge surprise to me, because it's 2 years in a row now where PowerShell has been the most popular course. And maybe we'll come back to that in this deck. I said on a Microsoft pack, alert, alert, alert. That's the first of our 3-letter acronyms. We've even got 4-letter acronyms in this session. Partner Advisory Council or Committee, depending on who you speak to. Microsoft invite key partners from around the world to sit on these. Usually there's about 12 partners who attend each session. We meet in Seattle a couple of times a year, and really we get one-to-one time with Microsoft leadership to talk about what they're doing, what they're thinking of doing, what's our reaction to what they're doing. Sometimes they listen, sometimes they don't, but it gives me a very clear sort of foot in the door, if you like, in terms of what's happening at Microsoft. I also did a couple of years with EPG, and I was chatting to somebody on the session, Shane, a little bit earlier on, who did 6 years with Microsoft, and he'll be very familiar with these acronyms. I'm going to leave EPG for a moment. We'll come back to that later on in the deck if you're not familiar with it. I'm also coincidentally the only Microsoft certified learning consultant in Australia. I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing. And I'm certainly learning every day. Just in putting this deck together over the last couple of days, it reminded me of stuff I've forgotten, and I learned a lot of new stuff, including the number of data centers that Azure's now got. The last time I kind of knew definitively, it was about 18, and now it's significantly more than that. My contact details are on there. They're on the slide at the end of the deck. If you want to get hold of me, gary.duffield@ddls.com. I'll be delighted to send out copies of the slides if you want to drop me an email. We'll also do a recorded version of this, hopefully. And if we forgot to press record, I'll remake one, and we'll do it. We'll do it that way. I'm on Twitter @GaryDuffield, and you can also find me on LinkedIn. But whilst Microsoft may be getting cool again, I'm getting older, getting grayer, and getting to have to wear glasses. So as Microsoft started to exist as a business, I guess from a technology perspective, so did I. My kind of introduction to computers was these things here, the old speak and spell things. Don't know if anybody remember these things, but they now spell colour. It'd give you something to spell, and you type it into the little keyboard, which wasn't even a QWERTY keyboard. But I got hooked on technology at that point. I really loved my vision of what it could do for me. And I guess it wasn't in the 70s when Microsoft started, later on. But I remember building one of these things. It was a Sinclair ZX80, and painstakingly soldering, teaching myself to solder, and building one of these. I really needed to work in IT. I didn't do that until a little bit later on. I was about probably 23, 24 when I finally got into IT. But I was hooked from a very early age. In my day, we had access to the internet, but it was slow, it was clunky. We used acoustic couplers. It didn't work in the same way that we have it today. And there's a whole generation of people, and I guess people who are on this call, who've never heard that sort of B in a crisp packet sort of sound of a modem connecting, who don't know the story of how Microsoft didn't really grasp the internet when it first started, and I'll say bolted on an Internet Explorer later on, bolted on TCP/IP. And had the slide worked, which it did perfectly this morning, you would have heard the noise of a B in a crisp packet and seen a picture of a cat slowly reveal itself on one line at a time. Sadly, it's Technology 1, Gary Nil. Oh, there you go. You press the magic button, and in theory, it starts to draw the cat, and in theory, you can hear a B in a crisp packet. But we'll move swiftly on because that didn't work well at all. So Microsoft was founded, way back at the depth of time, and you may recognise this good-looking chap now. He's on course for being the world's first trillionaire, if a report that I read over the weekend is true. Bill Gates and Paul Allen pulled Microsoft together, as I said, in the 70s. And after a little bit of sort of toing and froing, they came up with the vision statement, which was to have a PC on every desktop and in every home running Microsoft software. At the time, that was considered revolutionary. Really, would we have these computer things at home? I haven't even necessarily got one on my desk at that point in time. Just think about your home environments. Forget your office. I was playing with our sort of Nighthawk router just the other day, and I discovered we had 16 devices connected to it. This is a family of 3, and there are 16 devices connected to the internet. So I think we can comfortably say that Bill Gates sort of achieved his ambition to have a PC on every desktop and running in every home. And I think we probably know the story, but we'll recap it anyway, of how MS-DOS arrived on the scene, and then Windows 95, NT, and even Windows Me and Windows Bob, which also gets an honorary mention a little bit later on. But we go back perhaps even further in time. When they first started to form the Microsoft business, they've been established for a little while. There'll be people on this call who will remember the first PCs, 4.77 megahertz would be an IBM XT. In those days, we used to very much buy best of breed, so Microsoft really was providing the operating system, MS-DOS, but in some instances, not much else. Our word processor of choice would often be WordPerfect. If you go back a little further than that, it might have even been WordStar. Our networking technology was invariably NetWare from Novell. If we had a database, it may have been DBase2 from Ashton Tate. And if we had a spreadsheet, there's a sporting chance it was SuperCal called Lotus 123. I know there are people on this call who'll be going, geez, do you remember that? Gosh, in WordStar, if you didn't want to put page numbers in, you had to do .op to omit page numbers, whereas now we click buttons and we drag things with mice. There was no consistency between these applications. They were all very different. However, they were all considered best of breed. And, that was how industry existed for a little while. But of course, like everything, we have to grow up. We have to move with the times. I can remember as a child saving up for one of these things here. It's a Commodore PET. I don't know if anybody remembers those things. There's one in the Science Museum in London I visited recently while I was over there. You look at it now, and it looks like it's escaped from the Ark. But back at the time, that was a state-of-the-art, bleeding-edge piece of technology that certainly didn't run a Microsoft operating system at that point in time. So let's just bolt on the Microsoft journey on top of that. So I was going to put an animation on this slide, but chose not to at the last minute because it took me about 9 hours to deliver it. Going back into the early 70s, mid 80s, Microsoft was trading with that logo. They came to market in 75 with a version of BASIC for the LTAR. Now I had the great opportunity while in Seattle recently to visit the Microsoft Museum in the Microsoft campus, and this box is sort of sat there for all the world to see. That's how their business started, pretty much. But they also flirted in the 80s with a version of Unix. It was called Xenix at the time. I can certainly remember. I remember installing it at Bassett's, the people who make licorice all sorts. That kind of quickly disappeared, and we didn't hear much about Unix from Microsoft for a little while until we spin right up to this point in time where we have Linux on top of Azure. But I'm jumping ahead a little bit. For those who are not familiar with the kind of Microsoft story, I think the reason they became phenomenally dominant was down to an error in IBM's negotiation. IBM needed an operating system for its new PC that was launching, research. That's a slightly later model in actual fact. It had approached digital research with a view to getting them to write an enhanced version of kind of CPM or whatever to run on top of that. For reasons that are lost in the depths of history but seem to involve digital research missing a meeting, they didn't get the business. And Bill Gates, ever entrepreneur, stepped in and said, hey, you know what, IBM? We can very happily create, or we have that operating system that you need. And well, it was a bit of a lie, they didn't. They went away and bought an operating system from another organization. They re-engineered it, they tweaked it. They released PC-DOS for the IBM PC, but they kept the rights to do what they wanted to it themselves, and they also released MS-DOS. And of course, we will know if we were about in that time, we ended up with a situation where we could buy an IBM-compatible computer. It was a device that was a reverse-engineered BIOS from the original IBM, but maybe by Compaq or Tandem as a brand that springs to my mind. And of course, the first place they would go for an operating system is Microsoft, and Microsoft clearly already had something available. And that was the start of what actually became the Achilles heel of Microsoft. As lots of people jumped onto the bandwagon creating PCs, and we all know a million different companies who did this, Gateway would be another example, they all OEM'd, original equipment manufactured, Microsoft operating systems on top of those devices, and that became a fantastic revenue opportunity clearly for Microsoft. And as you'll see in a slide or two, that generated phenomenal growth as basically every time somebody bought a PC and PC demand was going up and up and up and up, Microsoft was getting revenue for putting the operating system on top of it. I remember a few years ago I had an opportunity to meet Alan Sugar, who owned a company called Amstrad and later Sinclair. And he commented that one of the things he got wrong in his life was assuming that the value came from the hardware and not from the software. He was almost giving the software away with his devices, thinking that purely as a piece of technology and not as services that you can bolt on. Which leads it nicely into 1983, when Microsoft released its first mouse. Not a particularly elegant looking thing, and probably generally not worthy of comment as we go through the timeline that is Microsoft. 82-ish, 83, Microsoft mouse. But they have a very robust business actually selling mice and keyboards. But they've certainly rekindled their hardware business with the rekindled if that's even the word, with the Surface. We're going to come back and look at the Surface in a few slides' time. But the reality is, Microsoft are a hardware manufacturer in their own right, and with the advent of the Surface, they really changed the game a little bit. I mentioned, a slide or two ago that back in the day we'd use our WordPerfect and our SuperCalc or Lotus 123 or even our Harvard Graphics. In 1989, this is very sad, but I feel I can share this with you because we're all friends. I did slides at my wedding speech, and I used the state-of-the-art slide creation software at the time, which was Harvard Graphics. This organization has long since disappeared, and 90% of the people on the call have probably never heard of them. 84, the game started to change. Microsoft had the bright idea, maybe copying things like Multimate, of actually taking products. It had a version of Word, a spreadsheet called Excel, and a presentation software called PowerPoint, bolting them all together and providing it as a single entity. So if you think about it, there's actually no such thing as Microsoft Office. Microsoft is just a catch-all term which includes the constituent parts within it. But that idea of bringing it all together, again, started to change the rules. It started to become the de facto standard, displacing WordPerfect and SuperCalc, as I said. Just shortly after that, Microsoft released its first version of Windows. That would be around 1985. That took OS2 a little bit by surprise, which was a similar operating system they were co-developing with IBM. Now, I guess Windows 1 didn't really ignite a lot of interest. I can recall at the time, or slightly after this, we were selling Tandem computers, 20 meg hard disk, 286 processor, and we would routinely, file the mice in a big box and take the 5 1/4 inch floppy disks full of Windows and file them in the bin somewhere, because nobody was interested in Windows at that point. But we know that changed very much with the advent of Windows 3 and Windows 3.1.1, Windows for Workgroups, when we got networking capabilities. So I guess what I'm saying, it was a bit of a slow burn, but once organizations started to adopt Windows, once Office was converted to a Windows-type application, suddenly from just the MS-DOS portion of mindshare for a PC, suddenly they have the operating system portion, the graphical user interface, or the WIMPs, if you go that back far, chunk of the mindshare, and they also had the productivity tools, the Office, the Word, and the Excel, PowerPoint. Swinging forward in time a little bit, 95, we also got an operating system called Bob. I was going to talk about the millennial edition of Windows here, but a lot of people remember Windows Me. Not many people have heard of Windows Bob. We don't talk about Windows Bob anymore. Somebody at Microsoft, for whatever reason, had the fantastic idea of creating this kind of environment. So rather than the windows that we move and pull and close that we're familiar with now, you basically have an office kind of environment or a home type environment. You could click on the bookshelf to read your books. There was a predecessor to Clippy down here, which is a dog. You seem to be doing something. You could click on your diary or on your address book to find the things that you need. It was very short-lived. It died a bit of a horrible death, and nobody talks about it anymore. We also got, in 95, Windows 95. Again, that was an awful long time ago. It was revolutionary at the time. Stand by for anybody who wasn't about when the launch of Windows 95 happened. We got some radical new capabilities. We got a browser. Wow. We got TCP/IP bolted in rather than being sort of a third-party product that we bolted on. We also got long file name support. Up until that point in time, every file that we created ever, we had to try and think of 8 letters by .3 letters in order to name it. It was revolutionary, but kept the old 8.3 file names for compatibility's sake. Today, if you took somebody who's been in IT, for the last couple of years and told them we didn't have long file names, not that long ago perhaps, they'd be utterly amazed. In 2001, we got what is arguably Microsoft's most popular operating system. In fact, I don't think it's arguable. I think it's just a fact. XP arrives. I've put in there it hangs around until Vista arrives in 2007. Many of us will be aware that Vista didn't catch the public's imagination and was quickly superseded by Windows 7 that had some success, which was succeeded by Windows 8, which had less success, which has now been superseded by Windows 10, which has got some critical acclaim. And in the numbers I'll show you a little bit later on, you'll see hopefully that it's slightly more popular than perhaps we think it is. The point of illustrating this is if you think of this time, okay, I've not put every product in there, but there's been a timeline. There's been, a handful of products that have been released. It's been very slow and steady. The elephants have entered the ring. The trapeze artists have been on. You spring forward to, the last, let's say, 5 years, for sake of argument, and suddenly there are a plethora of new products, things that we've never heard of. If you go back and say, what's a SkyDrive? Now it's obviously a OneDrive. What is a Surface? What's a Surface Hub? What's a Surface Studio? For goodness sake, what's a Yammer? What's a LinkedIn, for that matter? System Center, Office 365, Nokia, Windows Azure, Microsoft Azure, Kinect, Xbox One, Skype, Windows Intune. We've had an unprecedented number of products released in the last sort of 5 years. I think 2013 was probably the busiest year they've ever had for product releases, new SQL Exchange, and so on and so forth. The amount of new product coming out of Microsoft has literally kind of gone like that. It's gone through the roof. And we as IT support people, we as Microsoft partners, we have to work out how to support this technology. We have to work out whether it's right for our business or not. Honest little story. Started doing these slides on an X1 Carbon, which is just next to me here. Saved it to my desktop. The machine failed. Damn, data's gone. I mentioned this to my wife, who's not computer literate. Her immediate response to me was, "Did you not save it in the cloud?" If only I'd thought of doing that. We have new technologies and new capabilities now, which simply didn't exist 1, 2, 3, or 4 years ago. So why is Microsoft doing this? Why is it making these tremendous investments in all of these new services? Well, I think the answer to that comes down to Microsoft's cash cows. They were getting a little bit poorly. The OEM revenue was falling as the sales of PCs were falling. Vista and Windows 8 didn't ignite interest. It didn't reboot the number of PC sales. There were new competitors snapping at their heels. Apple had been an also-ran for many years, and suddenly it was producing some very sexy technology. But there were also competitors chipping away at Microsoft's server-type business. Microsoft won that business contentiously, I guess, from Novell a good few years ago. Suddenly, organizations like Amazon and Google suddenly had viable propositions, which meant you might not need your NT4 server, your Windows Server 2008, or whatever it happened to be, somewhere in the back office. And I guess the reality was Windows Post machines were not really that sexy. They're a bit like the circus. They haven't really changed for many years. They tended to be black, they tended to be big, they tended to be heavy, and they tended to have batteries that lasted about 2.5 minutes. And of course, we have Apple disrupting that. The iPad displaced the PC for many people. I know people now don't have a PC, they use a tablet device of some description. Back in 2011, we had very sleek looking Apples, which were very thin, titanium type cases, very slick operating systems. And we had older, chunky machines like this HP Pavilion here from the same generation. Arguably this machine isn't too bad because it's shiny, but it just looked dated by comparison. There were a number of tablet manufacturers suddenly running operating systems not really designed for a tablet, with Windows 7 on. Again, they looked chunky, and they'd be trying to be sold that they're Windows compatible, but that was becoming less and less important. And that was not missed by Microsoft. Windows compatible used to be the thing. After IBM compatibility faded away, is this application, is it a Windows application? Is this device, capable of running Windows at a reasonable speed? Well, those days were changing. And clearly Microsoft had to take some time, disrupt, shake up, change, challenge, move its entire business, or risk failing and risk sort of disappearing into obscurity, becoming the traditional sort of circus of 2017. They did a number of things to do that, and I think most of us are aware that they changed their management team, which we'll get back to very shortly. But they also changed their mission statement, and this chap is the current CEO of Microsoft. He's generally regarded as doing a very good job, and rather than a PC on every home and every desktop, which I think they've achieved, they changed their mission statement. In fact, they took a couple of iterations. Steve Ballmer, the predecessor to the current CEO, he created a mission statement that ran to about 19 pages. I think today they have a reasonably succinct mission statement, is to empower every person and every organization, people and businesses on the planet to achieve more. That's kind of pretty bold, I guess. But by using software, they genuinely believe that they can actually achieve that. And looking at a slide deck that's got video embedded, it's got dynamic links. I couldn't have done that 5 years ago. I've achieved more by using the latest and greatest technology than I ever could have achieved with earlier versions of PowerPoint and definitely with Harvard Graphics, as much as I liked that software. But in order to reinvent Microsoft, they clearly had to disrupt themselves, and they also had to disrupt their partners, and Microsoft did just that. I've been very lucky in my life that I've been to the Worldwide Partner Conference, which is a huge event they host in the States or occasionally Canada. I've been, I think, every year since my daughter was born, which was 98, apart from New Orleans. I've always missed New Orleans, unfortunately. I remember the day that Steve Ballmer, with his all-in messages, started to talk to Microsoft partners who traditionally sold servers and the tin and the Windows Server operating system on top and the services that wrapped around it. I can very clearly remember him saying, hey, the world's changing. We're going to the cloud. You guys either come with us or you get left by the wayside. Let's say there was 14,000 people there that year. I thought, geez, what's that going to do to numbers? Next year there'll be me and a tumbleweed here. The following year, numbers had gone up considerably. Suddenly there were new businesses entering the market who hadn't got the legacy, hadn't got warehouses full of tin, and I thought that was pretty fascinating. But they've released some sort of stellar products. This is the Surface Notebook, and if you've had one and you had the first revision, yeah, I know about the overheating issues. If you had one of the original Surfaces, which I do and I use every day, yeah, I know about the Wi-Fi issue. But they released some devices which were just slick, designed to exploit Windows, did things which Microsoft laptops or PCs at the time were just not capable of doing. And suddenly their original equipment manufacturer vendors, HP, those kind of organizations, took note and went, yeah, hang on, we probably need to spray all our devices silver to start with, because that's clearly the flavor of the month, make all our keyboards detachable, and actually just catch up with the times. And there's some sexy technology here. There's the Surface Hub. Although the scale doesn't do it justice here, this is a huge thing that sort of screws to the wall. Remember the first time I saw that, it was a company Microsoft bought. Blown away by that. We use telepresence technology here at DDLS from Compaq. I'd love to get one of these and to have a play with it. The Cisco Studio with a little sort of dial thing that sits on the screen. They're really kind of getting it together. They've disrupted across here and here. They've disrupted their own channel, the people who are actually creating PCs that would traditionally have MS-DOS put on it, or Windows 3.1, or Windows 10, and everything in between. I don't know if anybody's seen that the HoloLens technology, which that's an example. It started it's starting to become available. One of our trainers who's visiting just recently that managed to secure one from somewhere, he brought it into the office and there's almost a queue of people actually stood up to have a play with it. I liked the demo that I saw last year actually in the US, which was a training demo, so clearly that was of interest to me. It was training aeronautical engineers on how to repair jet engines, and rather than putting a huge jet they basically had a virtual one and they could grab it, touch it, spin it, start it, move it around, explore it, open it up, and start to get inside that piece of technology. You know, tremendous stuff really. So there's new stuff happening, and you know, that's kind of changing the way Microsoft's making its money. You know, back in the depths of time, they're not making their money today through advertising. They're certainly not making it through mobile devices. They're not yet making it through subscriptions. They've always made their money through, as I said a couple of times, through OEM. And this must be slightly after 95. It was an old picture of me I found just recently. It popped up on Facebook's Remember the Good Old Days. It's me sat at what is clearly an XP machine. I forget what make it will have been. I will have bought it. It will have had Windows bolted on it. And, you know, that would have contributed to Microsoft's revenues. By the way, as I studied this picture, I was alarmed to find Scooby-Doo hiding away down here in the bottom of the picture. That looks like a Cisco hub with just two wires in it. ET poking out from behind the corner, and clearly back then I had no success in growing sort of plants inside the house. But also, as we look over here in the US, a 386 machine, 133 megahertz, fully loaded with Windows operating systems, presumably maybe Windows 95. So its cash cow, its OEM channel, was disappearing, as we saw the sales of PCs slowly disappearing. It peaked at about that point in time, and it's been declining ever since. I've read some reports that PC sales are sneaking up a little bit this year. Who knows? Only time will tell. I was going to put an animation on this slide as well, but again, it would take too long, and because we obviously have time constraints, I'll abridge this as best I can. It's a slide I've used many times. In fact, the original source file slide for this probably goes back about 6 years. In fact, even before I moved to DDLS and I was still in the UK. But I recreated it a couple of nights ago. I actually sat down, watched my kitchen rules, and thought, actually, I'm going to start over because I need to expand it and put more years in. What I've done is I've plotted what I consider to be kind of the eras or the epochs of computing. You know, if you go back to the 60s and 70s, if you had a computer, it would be a mainframe. It probably used punched paper, punched cards. Black art, you probably had to be a rocket scientist to understand it. In the 70s, we moved more towards microcomputers, and I guess maybe I put things like PDPs in there, PDP-11s, etc. The era that we live today probably started in sort of the mid to early 80s when the first IBM XT shipped with its PC-DOS operating system, and you can see we had a flurry of activity around that time. Windows 3.1.1 existed, Office was formed, and you know, we moved on then to a more client-server environment. Suddenly we all had SQL databases or maybe Progress databases, and we've now moved from there to the web and then onwards to the cloud. So I sort of plotted Microsoft's revenue against that, and you know, you can see from 8 million turnover, you know, pretty much in the first records I could find back in the 70s, through to around 2010, arguably the end of the sort of mass PC, buying a PC, beige-coloured box that you find, you know, all in a row at some computer store somewhere. And they had fairly meteoric sort of revenue. Suddenly we're up to $62.4 billion worth of revenue. Whether it was insightful or whether it was luck, at about the time that started to plateau, started to trail off, Microsoft started to introduce technologies like Office 365 and like Azure. They clearly knew this was coming and started to invest in finding alternatives. You know, maybe IBM were even more forward-thinking in terms of what they were doing. They sold their PC business to Lenovo, the makers of the X1 Carbon that failed, as it happens, you know, somewhere around 2005. You know, way ahead of the numbers that started to see it decline. In fact, IBM decided to sell its server business not that long ago, also to Lenovo, I think. So, you know, they're clearly getting out of hardware. They see the value to be in software and value in services, although I don't think there's much OS2 or OS2 warp shipped anymore. But Microsoft has continued over this period of time, as revenue flattened, to introduce new products the Surface PC, as I've mentioned, it purchases Nokia, which turned out to be almost a vanity purchase. It didn't work for them. They've sold off their entry phone division. And if you look at their sort of strategy as documented, it is to have a mobile strategy, but almost with niche devices. I've been very fond of my Microsoft phone over recent times, but did defect to Android. And Microsoft don't care, because quite frankly, I've put Office on that device, I've put OneDrive on that device, and I'm actively using its services. Sadly, the apps available on the Windows mobile platform just didn't work for me. It's not been all good. At a point in time, Microsoft laid off a lot of people. They occasionally have rounds of redundancies, and that's kind of how it goes, really. Interestingly, revenues have taken a bit of a downturn, and I can only put that down to the fact that DDLS wins the Global Learning Award. Something has happened at that point in time, and we will address that on the next slide, in fact. So if you're a techie and you're looking at this and thinking, I don't kind of care about revenue, well, I'd invite you to think about this. I'd invite you to think about Microsoft as a commercial business. It's there to make money. I'd like you to think about the fact that the products it releases and it sells and that we support are the things that drive this growth, that drive this revenue, and also drive this decline here. And if you were to drill down into that a little bit further, there's a fourth part of this, which I've omitted because the revenues weren't great and it's not necessarily 100% clear what sits inside it. But Microsoft's business is seeing some growth. Intelligent Cloud, $25 billion business. These figures are financial year 16, so they're pretty much bang up to date. I hate people who read from slides, but I'm going to do it anyway. Server products and cloud services revenue grew by 4%, driven by revenue growth from Azure of 113%. It's not a huge, great number, the actual physical sort of cash number underneath it, but growth of Azure, its cloud service, at 113%. That's phenomenal. Office grew just slightly. Dynamics is growing, but you can see productivity in business is pretty much plateaued. And the more personal computing, these are the names Microsoft uses as their sort of categories, decreased significantly to lower revenues from devices and Windows. They're selling less devices, obviously, because they've restructured their business. Less Windows as the OEM market changes. Offset, however, by search and the fact that Surface revenues increased by 13%. It's $1 billion revenue stream for Microsoft right now. So you can see that Windows falling off a little bit, cloud services, Office 365, massively important to the strategy that Microsoft has. And, I'll go a little bit further. I mentioned the Worldwide Partner Conference earlier on. I'll mention Ignite, I think, towards the end of the session, which is their technical conference next week, which I'll be attending. There was a time, in the early noughties where you'd attend one of these events and there'd be people on stage and they'd come on with a box of Microsoft back office, or they'd have a copy of SQL Server or something. It's very rare now at Microsoft that you'll see a boxed product anywhere near the stage. You'll see lots of slides, lots of cloud demos, lots of examples about how cloud is changing the world and 4 billion people next week are going to be using it. I can't recall the last time I saw somebody say, hey, there's a new version of Exchange Server. It's on this DVD here. There's a new version of Windows Server. It's on this DVD here. Also in this session, which we might not get a chance to show you, is that you can now run up Windows Server 2016 in the cloud. I did it last night, in fact, and I captured a little video, which at this time we'll look at the end of the session. If they don't get this right, they run a risk, as I said, of falling into obscurity. And, if you look at what's been before, there are organizations here, CompuServe you may never have heard of, ICL, Sperry, Wang, WordPerfect we've mentioned, Lotus, AOL, Compaq, who've disappeared or had to restructure or exist in a very different form than they do today. They are the disrupted. They are the organizations that failed to keep up with the times. Nokia missed the smartphone market, weren't saved by Microsoft. There are disruptors, of which I'll include Microsoft. They've disrupted their own partner model. Amazon, who would have thought a company that sold books would suddenly be, I think they're still the largest cloud provider on the planet, that Google would offer a suite of applications, a competitor for Word and Excel and PowerPoint, that organizations like Sage, for example, will be disrupted by MYOB and maybe have to play catch-up, that Salesforce would dominate the CRM marketplace, that Apple would come up with a range of technology which was shiny and silver and very, 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 very appealing. Tesla, revolutionizing battery technology. And I was over, as I said, in the US just recently, and I visited the Bellevue shopping mall, and I've never seen this before because I don't get out of Perth that often. But in a shopping mall, there was a body shop, there was a shop selling candles, and in the middle, there was a shop selling Tesla cars. You know, who would have thought in a shopping mall you'd be buying an electric vehicle? This is Flash Gordon, this is Buck Rogers in the 20th century. But even my simple little business is being disrupted. You know, I used to be a trainer. I think I stopped training in about 95 when Windows 95 arrived. You know, back in the days, the NetWare days, those days, we'd get a nice paper-based manual, and we'd go through the manual and we'd take the delegates on a 5-day journey to teach them everything they needed to know about managing a technology, Windows 95 or whatever it happened to be. This is the experience that a customer will get now. They will actually get a digital bookcase. They will consume the manual on their device. They can open manuals for courses that they've attended from the bookshelf. If they go on a course and the course is updated, so if you go from 20533A to B, which is a long-needed update to that particular Azure course, they will automatically get the latest version of that manual, so it stays semi-up-to-date. And today there are companion products like Mock on Demand, which I'll talk more about in another session, which also sit in the same category. So, we've suddenly got a situation where, for our business, we don't have to keep stock of all these manuals. When we're kitting out trainer prep areas, we don't need more bookshelves than the state library, because every trainer can carry every manual for every course they follow, on their device of choice, whether it's Android. This platform now supports Android, although I've not used it, or a Surface device, as in the example that I put together here. So let's just take 2 seconds and just quickly reflect. So, I've taken you through some older products, hinted at things that are to come, talked about Microsoft as a business, even made a very unfair comparison to the circuses of old. But actually, maybe it's not that unfair after all. Microsoft as a business is producing some great technology. I would argue that I'd go head-to-head with anybody and say they've got some fantastic solutions and fantastic products. The way it trades, the way it deals with its customers, it's been reasonably consistent for a number of years. And I said I'd come back to EPG. EPG is the Enterprise Partner Group, and thought I'd just talk very briefly about the structure of Microsoft over a couple of slides. Microsoft generally categorizes its business as larger organizations, which would fall into the EPG category. You can probably name these. These are huge organizations. I know there are a couple on this call because I had a quick look at the delegate list before we started. You can probably name these. These are the big players in town. Stare out of your window, whichever big organization you can see, if they're a Microsoft technology, they'll probably be looked after internally by Microsoft, by the Enterprise Partner Group. And as I said, I did 2 years with that organization. I looked after Fujitsu, Nortel, British Telecom, and 2 other organizations I can't even remember now in the depth of time. They will have dedicated resources, dedicated sales teams, dedicated technical resources, etc. And I'm not sure of the current number of customers in each category. It goes from small to everybody else, so I just put a best guess on the data that I had here. SMS&P we'll come back to and refer to in a moment or 2. So with the best will in the world, technology 2, Gary nil, because, there we go, my battery-powered mouse packed up, but a quick battery respin and all seems well. So who's leading this disruption at Microsoft? Well, we've already been introduced to Satya. He's the new CEO in town. We clearly don't care about any of these other people because they're not important. We're probably just interested in this guy because that just happens to be me. Sadly, my ability to disrupt this market is somewhat limited. However, I'm continually impressed with what Satya is doing and the way he's leading the Microsoft business. So if he's leading the business, then clearly he has a team of people to help him do that. Microsoft is structured so that it has a board. They get their pictures in color. Bill Gates sits on that board. He's not the chairman. He's sort of a technical advisor. And underneath that, they have a senior leadership team, often referred to as @corp. You'll hear that expression time and time again. Satya leads that as the chief executive officer. I'll just highlight a couple of people on this list. Judson will come back and talk about in a moment or 2. Chris, who's their marketing CMO, he's a good guy. I had the opportunity to have lunch with him, and we were talking about the Microsoft stores. And I said it'd be great if we could get some connection to the stores in Australia and talk about how we can help customers who attend. And he took that on board. And by the time I literally got to whatever I was doing next, he'd emailed me This is somebody who sits next door to the CEO of Microsoft in meetings. He'd emailed me with an introduction to the people who run the stores in Australia, and we've not yet capitalised on that, but we certainly will do. I'll also introduce you to Scott Guthrie. If you don't know Scott and you are attending Ignite Microsoft's conference next week on the Gold Coast, he's the keynote speaker. So arguably Australia rolls up into this board, so they ultimately report to somebody who appears on this list, often through Singapore. The Microsoft model in Australia, when I did the overview for this session, I thought, this is easy, we know these guys really well. I might even get Pip Marlowe to do a video for us. And then suddenly everything changes. Microsoft's managing director, a very enigmatic lady called Pip Marlowe, moved out of the business. She now sits completely outside Microsoft, working at Suncorp, allowing a gentleman, nice guy, we've met him a few times, called Stephen Worrell, step up into the managing director's position. And a guy called Mark Lee down here looks after the small to mid-market solutions and partners. There you go. Finally, what SMS&P stands for. If you think of the triangle, the model, if you like, this is the majority, the hundreds and hundreds, rather than the very top, which is the sort of elite, big, large organizations. But if you're scanning this list, and I dare say you're probably not, you may well have spotted that there's nobody looking at EPG, who manages the enterprise partner group. Well, that's an interesting one, and we'll come back to that on the next slide. There's also a guy called Phil Goldie, another nice chap who we know well. He's moving to New Zealand with Microsoft to take up the SMS&P role. So that job is actually vacant. If anybody fancies being a director at Microsoft, it was advertised on LinkedIn only last week. So two very busy slides with a lot of personalities on it. I'm afraid it gets just a little busier just for one slide. So let's pay attention, W7. It's one of those moments where there's a lot of information to divulge, but the relevance and your ability to use it is, I guess, somewhat limited, particularly if it involves cars that turn invisible, which was perhaps the least plausible of any James Bond gadget ever. I mentioned Judson on the previous slide where I showed America, the American leadership team. He's been promoted and he now looks after the enterprise partner group. Remember, those are the large organizations of household names. He also looks after developer experience, DX it's known as, and the mid-market solutions and partners. So he's the top of the tree when it comes to that. But they were two very separate entities, those EPG and those SMS&P. Back in Australia, Steve, who used to run EPG, he's now MD. Are you keeping up? Mark Lee runs SMS&P, as we said, and Phil Goldie's relocating. So I guess, Microsoft would replace the EPMG lead or whatever. But on the 1st of February, so literally, this is kind of hot off the presses, Microsoft globally are consolidating the enterprise partner group and the small to medium and partners category. And I don't actually know what that looks like. How that's going to change the shape of Australia, completely unclear to me. But I guess what it says to me is that they're going to go for a more consistent approach. Microsoft Learning, of which I'm proud to represent, we now also sit inside that group along with Readiness. So it's interesting and exciting times as Microsoft restructures its own business. But I've also mentioned a few times partners, and I know there are a couple of partners on this call. If you're a customer, if you're a user of Microsoft technology, then this may be of interest to you. So Microsoft has also changed the way it sort of sorts its partners out. There used to be a number of categories, and basically you'd have some skill in a given category and get some badges to prove that. They now have these high-level categories here. Oops, I missed that by one. Here. Apps Dev and ISV, Cloud Platform and Infrastructure, Data Management and Analytics, Business Applications, Mobility and Productivity. And as I said, I can make these slides available, but under each of those competencies, there are a number of subcategories. So, for example, Cloud Platform might be a category, which is a category. Data Center in the cloud might be another category. And these would be the technologies that typically we're talking about here. So what does all that mean? Gary, that's just kind of gobbledygook. I'm not understanding the point you're making here. What I'm saying is, out there in the wonderful world of Microsoft, as you buy services that are manufactured or written by Microsoft, you're invariably buying for a partner. A partner has a level of, I guess, standing within Microsoft. You'll have a number of competencies or a competency, and based on your ability to sell and your ability to deliver, you'll either be a silver partner or a gold partner in this brave new world. So if you wanted to buy, I don't know, a mobility, or perhaps better would be like a dynamic solution, Going to a cloud infrastructure partner to buy Dynamics might not immediately be the right thing to do, although they may have skills. Maybe you want somebody who has more expertise in that particular category. Who knows? I put gold stars on there because I'm delighted to say that as of literally 3 days ago, DDLS is a gold partner for Cloud Platform, for Data Center, for Cloud Productivity. We will add others as we get all of the trainers registered. It's a massive change for the learning community. We're likely to be the only gold partner in the whole of Asia for learning. From the middle of this year, one of only about 12 globally. So that's huge for us. And this disruptive model, this little old training company from the bottom of the planet, is suddenly sitting with the huge players out there at Microsoft. So we're hugely, hugely proud of that. So this new partner model, this new approach, is it working? Well, I'm certainly not going to read you this slide, but yes, would appear to be the answer of that. Cloud revenues up, 70 million people using Office 365 every month, triple-digit growth on Azure, Windows active on 400 million devices. Geez, that's phenomenal. I think 28, 29 people on this call. Let's just think and try and imagine what 400 million kind of people on 400 million devices. Okay, I guess we've all got 2 or 3 devices each, but those are just huge numbers. And interestingly, I found that they're also looking at hours of usage, 197 billion hours of usage. Why would they be looking at usage? That's fascinating. Who knows what's this space? You probably also noticed I've asked you a lot of rhetorical questions in this session, and I'm going to continue doing that. So, asking for a friend, I want to ask you this question. What is Microsoft Azure? What is it you think of when you hear Microsoft Azure? Taking you on this journey, we've had nearly 50 minutes of DOS here and Surface there and whatever else. What do we think when we think Azure? Do we think huge, great warehouse full of computer goodness, probably with no people in it, probably sealed shut, maybe a whole bunch of containers? Do we have that vision, or have we perhaps never even thought of it? Or have we scaled even further? Have we thought that it's a whole bunch of data centers all over the planet? And this caused great debate between myself and a guy called Adrian Smith, who's one of our senior trainers who delivers Azure training for us here in Perth. And I asked him on Messenger last night, I said, can you tell me how many data centers Microsoft's got? Because I can find 22. He logged into his subscription. I think he found 22 that he could see. I found some data on Microsoft that said 24. I found some more data that said 38. So I'm confused. All I know is that, as of a little while ago, a couple of years ago maybe, we got a couple of data centers in Australia, so we weren't reliant on the pipe across the seas to Singapore or wherever, which certainly seems to be getting cut all the time in Perth. Suddenly we've got our own data center, so performance, if we've got the internet bandwidth to start, it should improve. But if you remember, the question was, what do we think about when we think about Azure? Maybe you're a bit more formal. Maybe you're a manager on this call right now, and you've got the Gartner definition: service-based, shared, metered by use, powered by internet technologies. Yeah, maybe you have got that view. But did you also know, and you probably did because I mentioned it earlier on, that comparatively recently, Microsoft is considered now to be a leader in the Gartner quadrant of technologies. This is a survey that Gartner put out periodically, not just across cloud technologies, across a whole host of different entities around, whether people are forward-thinking, backward-thinking, laggards. And Microsoft are up there at the top as a leader in cloud technologies. If you're not familiar with these kind of charts, just Google Gartner, and I'm sure you'll find loads of them scattered over the internet. Or maybe you've got no idea what Azure is or a cloud is, and I'll just take 3 slides to explain that to you. In this model, that's a traditional model. The washing machine here represents your server hardware. You're paying for the asset. You're paying for the maintenance, the capacity, the capability. You're paying for the skills and how to use it. Your computer needs arrive, and in this case, in this analogy, your washing load arrives, and you've created your local assets. You've put your workloads into your local on-premise servers. And of course, you end up with increased workloads, we get new types of demands, things that we've never done before. We're still paying for the cost of the asset, it's perhaps not scaling anymore, we've got to add new capacity, and maybe that model breaks down a little bit. The wonderful world of Azure and cloud generally, as I'm sure 99.9% of people on this call know, rather than owning the asset yourself and having on-premise, or maybe having a hybrid mix of on-premise and in the cloud, our maintenance costs, our costs of assets disappeared, and we fundamentally rely on a third party to provision all of those services for us. And there are providers who will do that, including Microsoft with Azure, including Google, including Amazon. And increasingly, we're seeing more and more people consume the training. It's a top 10, Azure is a top 10 training course for us across the board. And if you think of a training business as being almost sort of a barometer of what's happening out there, clearly to be a top 10 course for us, and we're by far Australia's largest provider of training, then organizations are adopting and deploying and wanting to manage. But again, I repeat the rhetorical question, when we think of it as Azure, what is it? I guess if I was asked today, I'd have a much more mature answer than I did 6 years ago when I first started to talk about cloud and Azure and the like. Today, I'd probably talk about it being around probably more than 70 different things that you can consume in the cloud, from containers, which are new to a lot of people. We're looking at Puppet at the moment, incidentally, and some other products. Most people perhaps think of it as just what appears in the top corner here as virtual machines. I can go to the cloud and I can spin up a Windows server on Azure, and it will be great, and I can put my applications on it and maybe even do some file shares and stuff. But today, you can get SQL databases out of the box, storage, almost infinite storage. Someone on here does Hadoop with HD Insights just tucked away down there. There's Visual Studio for developers. There's the Internet of Things Hub. I'm fascinated by Internet of Things. I've heard some great stories. A good friend of mine is an MVP for Azure, a chap called Martin Abbott. He's speaking at Ignite next week. They do a lot of Internet of Things, including bolting devices to bikes for competitions, so you can measure the rotational speed and the distance and the location, and stuff that clearly I've never been on a bike in 20 years, that I can only dream of. It's an Internet of Things solution. So for me now, Azure is not this server thing that you just spin up. It is a whole suite of services, and this is just a very small example of what's kind of out there. I've been experimenting with something called OpenEdX recently as a pilot for Microsoft. I needed a Red Hat Linux device. I needed to install the OpenEdX software on it. I did it in under an hour, and I did it on Azure using a Linux box. Now, that's pretty impressive stuff. Originally, up until 10 minutes ago, this was 6 slides. I put it onto one because I was aware by now I'd probably only have sort of 5 minutes or so left. Really creating this deck today has really highlighted to me that we need to do another session that just drills into Azure, that talks about all the different services, or some of the services that I've just mentioned. So I'm certainly looking to do that, and perhaps I'll invite my friend Adrian to do that for me. It was a fairly slow night last night, so I also created this video, which maybe if I click that, it will play, or maybe it won't. So this was literally yesterday at 6:53 in the evening. I thought it'd be a great idea to actually just give you an example of what's possible. So I'm not going to show the whole video because I'm conscious that we're into the last five minutes. But I was able to go in here and spin up a virtual machine. I think I chose Windows Server 2012 because there's a sporting chance I'd be able to fly it. I was able to create it. I was able to log into it. And you can see what I'm doing here is I'm looking at existing assets. So almost all of a sudden, I can see why I'm getting huge bills on my company Amex for Azure usage, because all over our business we're spinning up boxes, some for training courses, some for experimentation, none yet for critical business services, but that's clearly going to come. I've got $177 of credit left, so we perhaps need to move this up. And you'll get notification here of updates and so on and so forth. But the most powerful bit of this is not me logging into a server. We've all seen servers logging in. It's probably when I click more services just down the bottom here. Hey, Gary, what is it you want to create? Do you want to create a virtual machine? Is it virtualized networking? Is it the Hadoop thing and the insights that we looked at? Is it a Power BI workplace entity? Is it an Internet of Things hub? I'm not sure what business problem I got, but I'm fairly sure somewhere tucked away under Azure there'll be a service that will help me somewhere along the way. And if I was to spin through this video, you'd actually see that I very quickly create myself. Well, I'll get the password wrong. I very quickly create myself a machine. The machine provisions, and it's not 7 o'clock last night yet, and frankly the machine is pretty much up and running. So, this is scarily exciting stuff in terms of our ability to do that. I'm deploying, it's now creating, deploying a brand new server. That server only came into existence at about 7:05 last night, and it ceases to exist now because I deleted it. So there you can see I'm actually RDPing in, and I've connected to a server. I'm in the cloud, and I'm away. That's rocket science. If you'd said to the Gary that was sat at that desk in, I don't know, the year 2000 or something, playing with XP with EP sat on the windowsill, hey, you can provision a server, you can do it without leaving your desk, without going to find a power block or buying new hardware, and we can just do it in double quick time. I think he would say, geez, you're living in phenomenally interesting times. If you wanted to live in an even interesting time, DDLS are over at Ignite next week. If you're going to Ignite, I would love to see you at the stand. First 10 people who wander up and say, hey, I saw your webinar, I'll ensure that we keep some of the quality swag back and make sure you get a copy. I'd love to have a conversation. And equally, by way of a special offer, I'm going to try and sell you something now because that's the way the world works. We have created a special for you. We will send you details. We've bundled the Azure fundamentals, which assumes you know very little about the cloud. We've bundled it with implementing Microsoft Azure infrastructure solutions. We've included 3 months access to the labs after the event, so you get some way to help you internalize what you've learned. And we've offered a significant discount on the back of that. And of course, if you'd like to reach out to me, I'm at Gary Duffield. Find me on Twitter. #DDLS training if you have a comment about today's session you'd like to make. Other than that, I'm 1 minute over. I appreciate your time. Manuela, I believe I hand over to you now.
Thank you, Gary. That was a fantastic session. We will now go through the audience questions. So if you have any questions, please type them in the chat panel and we will address them. I've already seen one question from Damien. He's asking if a copy of the presentation will be made available after the session. We will send you a link to the recording of this event within the next couple of weeks, along with the details of the Azure offer Gary has just mentioned. If you need the
slides, I'm just send me a tweet that you'd like the slides, and I'll get in touch with you, and happy to facilitate that. There are actually another 22 slides in case of emergency run out of time, so I'm very happy to share those if you'd like a copy.
Okay, thank you. And then we've got a question from Mark. How can I depend on cloud technology when our office, which is located in rural South Australia, has unreliable internet access? Telstra refuses to upgrade the local exchange, which is why I have an on-site server.
And I'm afraid in that situation, you're always going to have an on-site server. What we're dependent on anything using cloud, of course, is the wire or the pipes to deliver us, the bandwidth to get to these wonderful services. And arguably, even if we had reasonable bandwidth, should we still be keeping some servers on site? My answer would be yes. But it's almost like still in the candy store, but not being let in because there's a huge river between us and the candy store. I'm afraid it's been great to see you on this presentation, but there's not much that you can take away from these new services other than speak to Telstra. There are Telstra people on this call at the moment, and continue to bang away and see at what point you'll get upgraded. I'll share with you that I've lived with, since I arrived in Australia 6 years ago, I've lived with 1.5 meg until I moved to an estate miles away from central Perth, basically a sand dune by the ocean, and it's got fibre to the garage. It's revolutionised my life. 1.5 meg for sort of 5 years, 5.5 years, fibre to the garage. Yeah, all good things come to those who wait, he said a bit flippantly, but, I got there in the end.
Okay, thank you, Gary. And then we have a question from Ali. Linux on Azure, I didn't see that coming. Is it popular?
That's a pretty good question because I haven't got an outstanding answer to it. I'm not experiencing a lot of people who are coming in demanding training for it. However, for certain workloads, Linux is the right answer. So I mentioned the OpenEdX example. So my suspicion is that it is pretty popular, but it's been used for very specific workloads. So in my case, it was OpenEdX, and it was the only platform that it would run on. I think that's still the case, but I might be wrong. So clearly, I had to spin up a Linux box to do that. So I don't know is the honest answer.
Okay, thanks, Gary. I believe all the questions have now been answered. As you leave the session, there will be a short survey on today's webinar. If you could complete the survey, that would be appreciated, as your insights will help us to shape future events. As mentioned, we will send you the link of the recording along with the Azure offer. And if you wanted more information on our Microsoft courses, please visit our website at www.ddls.com.au. On behalf of DDLS, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you all very much for your time.